Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking a genuinely fascinating engineering mystery. If you've ever traveled across the Atlantic, you might have noticed a pretty striking visual contrast out there on the highways. The massive semi-trucks moving goods across these two continents, well, they look fundamentally different. Honestly, it's almost as if they belong to entirely different industries. We're going to break down exactly why that is. And I guarantee you'll never look at a semi-truck the exact same way again. Okay, let's dive into this, because this is the core mystery we're solving today. Why on earth would two regions, both highly developed, both moving massive amounts of cargo on paved highways, settle on completely opposite vehicle designs to do the exact same job? I mean, it's like a giant puzzle, right? Just look at the fundamental structural difference here. On one side, we've got the American standard, the long nose with a long wheelbase. The cabin sits comfortably right behind the engine, which gives the truck that classic, elongated profile we're all used to seeing. But on the other side, we have the European standard, the cab-over-engine design. Over in Europe, the driver is quite literally sitting directly on top of the engine block, creating this flat, vertical front. And this isn't just an aesthetic choice. This is a brilliant story of form, strictly following function. So, to really understand the design, we have to start with the human element. In the US, owner-operators are incredibly common. These are folks who personally own their trucks and, well, essentially live inside them, sometimes for months at a time. And because they spend so much of their life on the road, owners modify these cabs into massive living compartments. We aren't just talking about vehicles anymore, they're basically rolling apartments. I'm talking built-in fridges, microwaves, freezers, full wardrobes, huge beds, multiple windows, and astonishingly, some even have their own toilet. Now, while you absolutely can spend a few days sleeping in a European cab over, that level of hotel-like comfort just isn't nearly as high. Now, what's really interesting about this is the legal reality behind all that comfort. It's not just a luxury. It's practically a survival requirement built straight into the rules of the road. Get this, in the United States, truckers are legally permitted to drive for up to 12 hours within every 24-hour cycle. Compare that to Europe, where drivers are strictly capped at just 9 hours. When you're pushing a massive machine down the highway for 12 hours straight, that extra comfort, that long wheelbase smoothing out the ride, and that sprawling living space at the end of a grueling shift, they become absolutely vital for the driver. But beyond just the driver's schedule, the geographic biome itself basically dictates the shape of these machines. Think about it. Much of an American truck's life is spent navigating the vast interstate system. The lanes are beautifully wide, and the roads just stretch out straight for literally hundreds of miles. In that expansive environment, a sprawling, long wheelbase is perfectly acceptable, and honestly, it makes the ride significantly more comfortable. But then, look at the European environment. European trucks are operating in a world of historical, narrow roads, incredibly tight roundabouts, and super dense urban environments. They simply have to be more compact and way easier to maneuver in traffic. Which brings us to how the European flat-face design brilliantly solves the problems of those narrow streets. Because cabovers have a shorter wheelbase and are fundamentally lighter, they're significantly easier to handle. But beyond just cornering, the flat-face design offers a massive visibility advantage. By putting the driver right up front, flat against the glass, the cabover gives them a vastly superior overview of the traffic. There are significantly fewer blind spots. In an American truck, those massive bonnets and thick A-pillars, they can make it really difficult for drivers to get a clear view. So the European design noticeably increases safety in those cramped, unpredictable urban environments. So this naturally leads to a bit of a rubbernecking question, right? If the American long-nosed trucks are so much roomier and more comfortable, why did Europe essentially ban them? Well, if we look at the historical timeline, impartially speaking, the US actually used to rely heavily on cab-over trucks too. It's true. Prior to 1986, the US had strict overall length requirements, making cab-overs extremely popular. But then, in 1986, the US revoked those strict limitations. And without those tight length caps holding them back, the roomier, way more convenient, conventional long-nose design just naturally took over across the United States. The really crucial point here lies in the strict mathematical limitations that are rigorously enforced in Europe today. In Europe, the strict total length limit for the entire vehicle is 18.75 meters, which is roughly 61 feet. Because of these restrictions, European trucks literally have to be as short as possible up front, just so they can tow more cargo in the back. Let's do the math real quick. An American cab alone can be 20 feet long. If you brought that to Europe, you'd only have about 40 feet left for the actual cargo. You'd be sacrificing incredibly valuable cargo space just for driver comfort.
But in the USA, there are no strict cab length limits, meaning drivers can absolutely maximize their living space without cutting into their payload.
And then we really have to consider the physics of hauling all that cargo at high speeds. This is a massive difference. In Europe, the speed of these trucks is strictly limited to 90 kilometers per hour. But out on the open roads in certain parts of the United States, trucks are legally allowed to reach incredible speeds of 129, and sometimes even up to 137 kilometers per hour. When you're hauling tens of thousands of pounds on long, straight roads at those kinds of speeds, the physics of wind resistance completely take over. The better aerodynamics of that sleek, long-nosed design become a massive, clear advantage over pushing a flat-faced European brick through the wind.
And this brilliantly illustrates our main takeaway from today's explainer, as our source material perfectly sums it up. One is not necessarily better than the other, but they are adapted to the needs of truck owners, the driver, and the government requirements. We started out with a mystery of why two identical industries use totally opposite designs. Well, the answer is that neither design is wrong. Both of these massive machines are perfectly evolved apex predators for their specific biomes. They are completely optimized for the precise rules, roads, and economic needs of their home continents.
But as we know, the world of engineering never stops moving. As global infrastructure becomes more congested and as environmental and aerodynamic rules become even stricter worldwide, how might these perfect machines be forced to evolve next? Will we see a hybrid design emerge, or are brand new technologies going to fundamentally rewrite the rulebook all over again? I really hope this explainer leaves you looking at the highway with a renewed sense of curiosity. Keep questioning the incredible engineering all around you, and hey, thank you so much for learning with me today.